Hello and welcome, everybody, to the first Sounds from Athens podcast. My name is Max Brunke, and I'm here with my friends Joe Collins and Curtis Fetter. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I am a student at Ohio University. I am studying journalism on the News and Info track. I do a lot of social media work and broadcast work with a couple of the organizations here. And I'll let my guests actually describe themselves for you guys.
What's up, everybody? I'm Joe Collins. I'm from Akron, Ohio. I'm also a news and info major here. One of my big specialties is reporting, editing, camera work, and play-by-play. One of my goals in life is to hopefully one day be a play-by-play broadcaster.
Hey everybody, I'm Curtis Fetter. I am also a news and info track major here at the EW Scripps School of Journalism. I work with a TV show Hardwood Heroes, which covers high school basketball in the Southeast Ohio region. And I also work with Bobcat Showcase, which covers all of the local sports here at Ohio University. And one of my specialties is in-play announcing and also reporting for games. And one of the specialties that I like to do that's kind of underrated is soccer. As a former soccer player, I've also done a bunch of those stuffs. But enough about me. Let's get right into the action we have here today, Max.
Yeah, so let's review our topics today. This podcast is going to be about the selection show that we witnessed earlier today. The top 6 of the college football playoff rankings and a little bit of a preview of the games that we're going to see coming up December 29th and also the national championship game, what we think we could see there. So I'm going to start with Curtis, actually, and we're going to talk about some of the championship games we saw this weekend.
There was a bunch of great matchups here, some closer than others, definitely, as we can tell if any of you guys were watching the Clemson versus Virginia game.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to start off here with the Big 12 championship game, Oklahoma versus Baylor. That was a thriller. Now, it went to overtime, but Oklahoma, they showed some vulnerability here. Now, that win over Baylor was a huge one. Definitely got them into the playoff, especially with Utah opening the door. We'll get to that later. But Oklahoma, they thoroughly outplayed Baylor, and the score didn't really do it justice. And part of the reason why was because of their efficiency in the red zone. And especially when it comes to the playoff, if they're going to beat LSU, they need to make that 7 points instead of 3. And that was one of the key points in that game. They just kept making field goals, and they allowed Baylor to get back in the game. And Baylor is a big play type team, and so when they get hot, they can beat you, and they nearly did. But Oklahoma, led by Jalen Hurts, came back, and that will be a great matchup in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl.
Yeah, I agree. Oklahoma, they did look like they had some issues going into, not going in, but at the start of that game. They let Baylor stay in it. Yeah, you were completely right. Baylor losing Brewer at the beginning of that game to a concussion and then having their second and third string come into the game, and they still took that game to overtime. That, I think, to me, that was really impressive by Baylor. But, as you were saying, Oklahoma, they really did just let them stay in it. They could have put that game away, and Jalen Hurts, wonderful quarterback. I mean, really.
He was a Heisman hopeful at the beginning of the season before that loss to K-State.
Only player right now in college football that has been the quarterback of 2 teams that have gone to the college football playoff. He was the Alabama quarterback for his first 2 seasons. And then this year, transferred to Oklahoma and put up his best season by far.
Yeah.
When you look at him now compared to where he was at Alabama, he's a totally different quarterback.
And you also have to remember, Jalen Hurts has experience in the national championship game. He did get taken out in that game, but it's still a point that he has that experience. And we'll get to it later, but people assuming that LSU versus Oklahoma game is going to be a blowout, I have to disagree with them.
And when you think about it, last year in the SEC championship, it was the opposite of what happened in the national championship. This time, Tua goes down. Jalen Hurts comes in and leads Alabama to a comeback victory against Georgia.
Yeah, I have been thinking that as well. But that Oklahoma-Baylor game, Oklahoma really did just let Baylor stay in it. But you cannot take anything away from Baylor coming in with that third-string quarterback. And he threw 2. He had 3 completions and 150 yards at one point and a touchdown.
And think about this. Baylor was 1-11 2 years ago. Matt Rule has come in and done an outstanding job. And I think he or Ed Orgeron should get the Coach of the Year because Baylor, when you look at them, they don't really have top recruits. They're not really a team in the Big 12 that everyone was looking at to be so successful. And to go 11-2 and be in the Big 12 championship, especially with teams that were expected to be good like Texas, we could go on a month-long tangent about how Texas was
They're not done either. They got to play
complete
against
disaster this year. They got to play against Georgia again, huh?
Yeah.
Baylor's playing against Georgia, and so their season is not over. Now, speaking of Georgia, it was a very not close game between Georgia and LSU. But the thing is, LSU showed some vulnerability on defense. Jake Fromm, who had been struggling a little bit, he was getting some passes. He was getting some 20-yard plays. But when it comes to those clutch moments, when they're inside, they're in red zone, they're in the LSU territory, they could not score. I remember there was a key interception that really changed the tide when he underthrew it to the sideline. And special teams, that also hurt them. The missed field goals. There was a difference. That game could have been a lot closer at halftime, could have been different. But eventually, against LSU, when you can score, you need to do so. And they couldn't do it. And eventually, LSU, Joe Burrow got his. He is by far the Heisman candidate so far. And when you can't counter that and when you can't conquer the defense, when they're giving you these big plays, it's not going to bode well for you. And that's how it panned out.
And when you think about this, LSU defense for most of the year has been criticized for being a lot weaker than past year's defenses. But they've got some very good guys. Grant Delpit, when he's healthy, is a first-round pick.
Absolutely.
Derek Stingley came up with a big interception late in that game that pretty much closed it out for LSU. And you can't talk about the Tigers without talking about Joe Burrow. I mean, the strides that he has made from last year to where he is now, it's pretty much, you can say it's one of the best college football seasons ever by one person.
And I'll get more into this later because I have a lot to say about Joe Burrow, but I was actually just discussing this with one of our other journalism friends, Jack Demler, and we were talking about just how freaking good that kid is. He is just absolutely, you saw tweets over the weekend. He is a NFL quarterback in a college jersey, and it's true. He's one of the best quarterbacks we've seen in a very long time coming out of college. But I want to hit on Georgia's offense right now instead because they are made out to be this wonderful, just absolute force on offense, and they're just, I'm sorry, but they're not. Any Georgia fans listening, they're not this powerful offense. Jake Fromm, as highly rated as he is, it's absolutely unreal how many times he overthrew receivers in that LSU game.
Doing pretty good now.
Exactly. Yeah, Justin Fields excelling at Ohio State, and we'll get into that when we get into the Ohio State versus Wisconsin game.
When you looked at Georgia's offense last year, Mecole Hardman, the wide receiver, not the Kansas City Chiefs, is having an outstanding year. He was gone. They also lost Riley Ridley to the NFL. They also lost people who don't really talk about is Elijah Holyfield, who was also a big back along with DeAndre Swift. And DeAndre Swift didn't really seem like himself yesterday against LSU.
I agree. I was actually going to bring him up too. I've watched a couple of Georgia games, and DeAndre Swift really he impressed me, especially in that South Carolina game. He honestly kind of played well, even though they did take that loss, and it was that's a bad loss to take, a 4-8 team to lose to, but. Georgia, you always think of them as this running back school. And what do we see in that LSU game?
Running back university.
Literally no run game whatsoever. It was so surprising to me.
Especially with that offensive line that they have.
Exactly.
They have a very good offensive line. I think they don't have anyone that's under 320 pounds on their offensive line. And they didn't really look too good yesterday. You saw a lot of plays of LSU's defense getting into the backfield and making stops.
This was a team that, if you don't remember, 2 years ago took Alabama to overtime in the championship game. You were talking about Baylor, a 2-year span. How about Georgia's 2-year span of being a championship contender to now not even being mentioned in the playoff discussion anymore?
And if it wasn't for Tua's 3rd and 25 miracle in that game, we might be talking about Georgia being a national champion 2 years ago, going to this.
Recruiting too.
Exactly, yeah. It would have changed a lot, but we're not talking about 2 years ago. We're talking about now. And Georgia, they're just not that offensive team that we thought they were this year.
And when you look at their opponents, they had a stat yesterday during the SEC championship. They played 6 teams that was either playing a a second-string quarterback or a quarterback making his first ever start. Even against Kentucky, they were playing against a receiver that was playing his first game at quarterback. So, they had not really played against no one's played against a quality quarterback in the SEC right now that Georgia's played since Joe Burrow.
Yeah, they'll have a chance to bounce back and make somewhat of a consolation of their season when they play against Baylor in their final bowl game.
Yeah, and we'll get into those bowl games later, but let's move on to Utah-Oregon, because this Friday night game, being an Ohio State fan, I have to admit I was rooting for Utah, simply because after watching that Friday night game, they are not that great. They really are not. The difference here was the quarterback position.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Oregon has a competent quarterback in Justin Herbert.
Justin Herbert.
Two-year starter. Someone was expected to be in the Heisman conversation at the beginning of the year, and really, at the end, he really showed that why he was in that conversation to begin with, because he's a very good quarterback that we could expect to see go in at least the top 15 in the upcoming draft.
Exactly. And we were talking about Justin Herbert last year going in the first round, and then he decided to stay, and we thought, okay, Oregon's going to be this powerhouse. They had that loss to Auburn early on, which it's okay, but
now that doesn't right now that doesn't look like a bad loss. One loss, a 1-point loss a 5-point loss to a team that just beat Alabama, a team that lost to LSU by 3, held LSU to the least amount of points the entire season, and then only lost to Georgia by 7. So Bo Nix, I know we're not talking about them, but watch out for him. I think he's gonna be a very successful quarterback.
Auburn might make their first playoff appearance next year.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think that Auburn is a seriously good team. They have a big future ahead of them. But their issue this year, and why this doesn't look like as good of a loss to Oregon anymore, is because they play that SEC schedule. And that SEC schedule, you will lose games unless you are the Alabama, the LSU, and you have that elite team.
When you think about it, 2 years ago, they were 1 game away from being in the playoff, but they lost their SEC championship. And that year, when they had Jared Stidham and Kerryon Johnson, they had arguably the hardest schedule that I've seen in a while. I mean, they were at Clemson, then they lost to LSU, but then rebounded with wins against the number 1 Georgia and Alabama at that point, and then ran into Georgia again in the SEC championship and couldn't get it done. But Auburn is a team that a lot of people should look forward to being a very good contender in the SEC West.
Now, Max, I know that Oregon was very impressive, had a good season, but kind of as an Ohio State fan, describe why you think that Utah, who could have punched their ticket to the playoff but missed their opportunity, why you would rather face Utah. What are their main weaknesses that you see?
So going into this weekend, think about what the Ohio State options were. It was either we were going to face a Georgia team. Maybe they would have moved up with a win to LSU. We're going to face a Georgia team with what seems to be a competent quarterback. We saw that against LSU. Obviously, he has some inaccuracy issues, but they're a well-rounded team. Then you have Oklahoma. Oklahoma, obviously, offensive team. They don't have the defense that you would want, but it's Big 12. No Big 12s really have a defense, but they have an unbelievable wide receiver in CeeDee Lamb, and they have an unbelievable quarterback in Jalen Hurts. And looking at that as an Ohio State fan, I look at Utah and I go, okay, they have this quarterback. He's newer. He's only a 3-star coming out of high school, which obviously you can alter that, and that doesn't mean much in some cases. But they just didn't have the talent that the Oklahoma and the Georgia had. And no offense to Utah, but had they won that game against Oregon, they would have gotten into that playoff without any notable wins. None.
And it still might have been a debate. Instead of having the landslide that the debate committee kind of had, Utah would have been competing with Oklahoma. Utah might not have gotten into the playoff. It would have been a heated discussion between the two teams for the playoff committee.
One thing I will say is Utah quarterback Tyler Huntley. Not really many people talked about him, but as you know, Joe Burrow finished with the highest completion percentage of any quarterback ever. Tyler Huntley was 3rd overall ever this year, so a very good statistical year for Tyler Huntley. But the thing is, him being in the Pac-12 and not really being in many primetime games, it really kind of prevented them from being looked at more as a good opponent to be in the playoffs.
And I honestly, after watching that game against Oregon, they didn't play that well. Their defense kind of got holes punched in it at times.
And that's what they were known for throughout the season.
Exactly. Yeah, everybody was talking about Utah's defense. I will not lie. Huntley looked like a great dual threat quarterback, and he had. It's just he needs to work on his decision making a little bit. But once he gets that well rounded out, they could be another contender next year again.
A person's name you'll hear for a long time in a few years is Kayvon Thibodeau.
Absolutely.
Number 1 overall recruit from this past year, defensive end that played at Oregon. He was outstanding in that Pac-12 championship game.
Oregon's no stranger to the moment either. They went to the national title game, lost to Ohio State. Now, speaking of Ohio State, they went to the Big Ten championship game and did a rematch against Wisconsin. Now, they destroyed Wisconsin earlier, but this time around was a different story again, and it was taking place in Indy. Now, Ohio State, they were always perceived as this team that had no kinks in their armor throughout the season. They were showing some kinks in the first half. They were down 21-7, and this is kind of their final test. Everybody was looking at Ohio State as this invincible squad, but the one thing that we never saw was how would they respond to adversity. They're down 14 at the half, and at that point, as an athlete, of course, the questions start going in your head, what if we lose this game? Are we still going to get into the playoff? But they shut all that out, and they held Wisconsin scoreless in the second half, ended up taking the game by storm, winning 34-21. I watched that second half. It was amazing, the masterpiece that they did, because what Ohio State's really good at doing is going on those runs, getting that 10-point, 14-point cushion, but then also when they get the ball to bleed out the clock, because their running game with J.K. Dobbins, their offensive line, kudos to them. They have protected Justin Fields very well throughout the year, and they've also helped J.K. Dobbins by providing all of those holes for him to run through. And their O-line really helps them, because when you win the offensive line of scrimmage, you win ball games. That's how it works. They're the boys that don't get any of the credit but deserve all of it. And so when Ohio State goes on that run, you look at the scoreboard, and before you know it, you're down 13, and there's only 4 minutes left to play in the game. And at that point, it's too little too late. And it was a masterclass by Ohio State, and what they say is true. There's hardly any weakness. And Chase Young wasn't as effective as he typically was, and they still pulled out the win. They're a winner-type team. They know how to win in any situation, and that's why they're so threatening in the playoff and are a legitimate national title contender.
It's this thing that we saw all year long, this super weird statistic that the second quarter for Ohio State was always so very impressive. Earlier in the year, they were scoring 28 points every second quarter, and that I think is where Ohio State's weakness does lie in a way. If you can put Ohio State away in the first half and not allow Ryan Day to get into that locker room and say, okay, this is what we need to do. If Clemson can do that in that playoff game, there's no chance Ohio State can win that. I just think that Ohio State, like you said, they really don't have any true weaknesses. There's nowhere you can say that is what Ohio State is not doing well. And even, like, it didn't even seem like JK had that great of a game on last night against Wisconsin, but he carried 33 times for 172 yards. And is it because we're seeing JK run 204 touchdowns? Is it because just offense is just so impressive that we need to look at other places? And don't even tell me that JK's 172 yards and touchdown was because Justin wasn't doing anything. 299 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air.
Wisconsin has always had a good defense, but one thing I will say is, how big was that fake punt in the second quarter?
Oh, their special teams. It's so underrated. You constantly see missed field goals, muffed punts. Their special teams, shout out to the punters, Drew Chrisman and the kicker. They do an excellent job of doing what they have to do. They put the points on the board. They pin them back. They let their defense go to work. They make it so that when you drive 40 yards down the field, you're barely cracking the 50-yard line, and you still have to punt. It's a very underrated side of the football game, and it really helps. And that's why, being so well-rounded, they're just a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, and looking back at like 2017, remember that Michigan game? 2 missed field goals. We had to come. It came down to that kicker making that field goal with 6 seconds left to tie it up and take it into overtime. And that in the Urban Meyer era, the special teams of Ohio State was the weakness. Penn State, when Saquon Barkley ran back the opening kickoff, it's just those types of things. It's the special teams for Ohio State.
And when you think about that fake punt, if you look at it, 14-0, it's 4th and 9. If Ohio State doesn't convert, Wisconsin could easily have gone up 21-0, and 21-0 versus 14-0 is a huge difference.
It's a momentum shift.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Where was that ball? Do you remember? It was
it was in Ohio State territory.
It was like on Ohio State's 30 or something like that, and that's
why very gutsy call.
Very gutsy. And again, Michigan game reference to 2017. I believe it was 2017.
2016.
It was 2016.
Yes.
Sorry, 2016 Michigan game. Fake punt on 4th and 6 in our own territory, our own 32 or something like that. We didn't get it. That's the difference. I think when you compare the smaller things, nobody thinks about the special teams, but that special teams getting so much better over the years for Ohio State has really helped them out. That's pretty much it for our championship games. We're gonna skip Clemson and Virginia because there's just nothing to talk about. Really nothing. My only issue with Clemson, Virginia is that Virginia only moved down 1 spot. They moved from 23 to 24. Yeah, it's Clemson. But you got beat by 40. Mm-hmm. How are you going to move down 1 spot after that? And they got a good bowl game. We'll get into that as well later. But it's unbelievable. Mm-hmm. I have my own opinion on that. But, all right, let's move into the rankings that came out today. We have LSU at 1, Ohio State at 2, Clemson at 3, Oklahoma at 4, and then the last 2 in were Georgia at 5 and Oregon at 6. I don't have any issue with the people that got in. I just have an issue where they placed them. I'm going to let Joe start this one, though. I feel like he has some pretty strong opinions.
Yeah, we're going to start with the elephant in the room. We're going to go with LSU and Ohio State. Now, you look at both of these teams. These two teams definitely have had the best seasons out of anybody, and nobody can debate that. Nobody can say that these teams didn't have a great year. I mean, no one expected Ohio State to be as dominant as they were, and no one expected LSU to run through the SEC.
Yeah. Just a reminder, ESPN gave Ohio State 8.3% chance of winning the Big Ten.
And the change of LSU has never really been an offensive team, but they just put up statistically the best offensive production out of any SEC team ever, and that is just crazy. Give Ed Orgeron and that coaching staff a ton of credit because they placed their offense in the hands of a 30-year-old man named Joe Brady. And Joe Brady said, well, we're going to go to spread. And this LSU team they are a scary team. This is a for real team right now.
So and incredibly gifted.
I don't think Oklahoma is...
They were mediocre at best not too long ago.
Mm-hmm. They were always considered the little brother to Alabama because it was always Alabama would come out of the SEC. The first ever playoff that Alabama will not be in it.
And it's the first time LSU beat Bama since 2011. Mm-hmm. And let's remember when Joe Burrow transferred to LSU, everybody was questioning his decision because they all thought LSU is just where quarterbacks go to die. They don't translate better in the NFL. And he just changed the picture of what a quarterback in LSU can be like.
And that's why it was so important for LSU's offense to change and adapt to having that style of quarterback.
When you look at their game again, they're 2 games that Joe Burrow's played against Alabama. The first game, they lost 29-0. They got shut out at home, and he threw for 173 yards and an interception. It's almost amazing if you look at his stats from this year. 31 for 39, 393 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 46 points put up on Nick Saban's defense.
In Tuscaloosa.
Now we get into the other rankings. Ohio State at 2. Clemson at 3. We all kind of expected Clemson to be there. Oklahoma at 4. The thing that doesn't make sense to me is Georgia at 5 and Oregon at 6. This is the thing that I think the committee has an SEC bias because Oregon is a conference champion at 11-2. Georgia just came off a 27-point loss in their conference championship. And really that was their only tough game of the year so far, besides Florida. But that was a neutral site game. There wasn't really any...
outside factors.
Yes.
No home field advantage or anything like that.
They did beat Notre Dame, but Notre Dame is currently not in the top 12. With Jake Fromm at the quarterback, Jake Fromm's highest completion total is 26 completions.
Oh boy.
And that was against South Carolina, the game that they lost.
Yeah, and they needed to throw that game because they were down most of the time,
and he couldn't make throws.
Yeah, it's just going back to that Georgia offense. They're just not as good as everybody makes them out to be. They should not be 5. Absolutely not be 5.
LSU had the problem this year. They changed, and they're the number 1 seed right now, and they've changed the SEC really.
Yeah, they have. And the issue with this year is that you had your powerhouses, Ohio State and LSU, but then every other team, you could say stuff about them. Yes. They either lost a game or they were Clemson, who literally didn't play anybody.
They nearly lost.
Even LSU
to North Carolina.
Even
1-point win.
LSU, there had been some times, like against Ole Miss, they gave up 37 points. Against Alabama, they gave up 41. Against Texas, they gave up 38. So a lot of people were saying this LSU defense, they have some problems with it, and Grant Delpit needs to stay healthy because he is the backbone of that defense.
Yeah, I agree. And like Curtis was saying, that UNC game was the first Clemson game I watched all the way through this year, and I was far from impressed. Etienne had a great game. He really did. Trevor Lawrence did not look like the Trevor Lawrence from last year. And you look back at that national championship game, 42-16?
44-16. And
44-16.
Everyone at the beginning of the year was saying how Trevor Lawrence was the Heisman favorite, and he is not even in the top 5 right now.
Yeah. And you even look back at last year, Kyler Murray ended up winning that. Don't take anything away from him because he was absolutely outstanding. And that's the whole thing with Oklahoma's quarterback. Over the past, 4 years?
Shout out to the staff at Oklahoma for training these quarterbacks.
Yeah,
this is a crazy thing.
Kyler?
Jalen Hurts this year has more yards and touchdowns than Murray or Mayfield did in their Heisman seasons. Any other year, if you put Jalen Hurts in the years that Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray in, he's the Heisman Trophy winner. But Joe Burrow has just been so amazing this year that Jalen's really either going to get second or third right now.
Yeah, I believe we were discussing this the other day, and you said the same thing, that he has these better stats. But listen, we have so much individual talent this year. You even Chase Young.
Yeah.
Chase Young, if he wasn't getting double teamed in that Michigan,
yesterday.
triple and double teamed in that Michigan and Wisconsin game.
Still hitting the arm of the quarterback.
What I don't understand is, as soon as that was happening and he wasn't showing up on the stat sheet, everyone was saying, "Oh, he's not a legit Heisman candidate. He's overrated." You can't just base talent on stats, because if you do, there's so many quarterbacks that right now that have great stats that aren't good quarterbacks.
He's a game wrecker. If you don't keep your eye on him, he will ruin your game plan.
Look at Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston's number 2 or 3 in the NFL in passing yards, but he throws an average of 2 or 3 interceptions per game.
Yeah, and you also got to understand that Jameis Winston took a while to get into it in the NFL. He had his whole stint where he was benched for a little bit, and
Fitzmagic in between.
Yeah, and this year has really been his breakout year. Breakout in quotes, yeah.
Big part of that can be with Mike Evans.
That too.
It's not. Yeah, to have a guy who's 6'6" at receiver, you can't really ask a lot of people to do that.
I remember his Texas A&M days. It was unbelievable. I knew he was NFL caliber.
Yeah, and Godwin on their wide receiver. Yes, Terry Godwin. Thank you.
So, is there any discrepancy? Do you think that LSU deserves to be the number 1 team right now?
No, I do not. Here's why, though. Here's why. If you're gonna put Ohio State at the number 1 position, they should not move down unless they absolutely have a howler. They did not have a howler against Wisconsin. They were down 21-7. That's a position they have not seen themselves in a while. But look what they did in the second half. They didn't give up any points, and they ended up winning that game by 13. That's not enough for LSU to jump Ohio State.
More credit to show their resilience and their ability to take a game over at will.
I criticize the committee a lot. I think they do a lot wrong. But this year, they did their absolute best job. I'm not giving them too much credit because it wasn't that hard. But they did a really, really great job throughout the whole ranking system. Week 8, I agreed. I really did. And then moving Ohio State up after that Penn State game, yeah. I agree too. Moving LSU over Ohio State the couple weeks before. Yep, I agree with that too. It was just my issue with this year's rankings is that it really was the SEC was too highly ranked. What they really did a great job of was putting Oregon at 6. They should absolutely get credit for that Utah win. They beat a Utah team that had all the momentum going into that game. And they were at 13. Yeah, it's a 7-spot jump, but still, they played a great game. They deserved that spot.
And also, kudos to the committee for making Wisconsin stay at number 8.
I agree with that, too.
Because you can't punish them for losing to Ohio State twice. I mean, Ohio State just had their number. Penn State lost to Ohio State, too, but you can't punish them for that. So kudos to them for making Wisconsin number 8 and sending them to Pasadena for the Rose Bowl.
And if Ohio State would have stayed at 1, I believe Wisconsin would have moved down. But I'm really glad that they moved Ohio State down and kept Wisconsin there to say, hey, Wisconsin, you put up a good fight in the Big Ten championship. It's hard to come back and beat that team. And it's hard for Ohio State to come beat the same team twice. But for them to put up that fight, you get to stay at number 8.
How about this? Utah moves all the way down to 11.
Yeah. Utah dropped that far. It hurts me a little bit. I wish they would have moved Florida and Penn State down 1 slot. They were both 9 and 10 going into championship weekend. Yeah, they didn't play a game, but Utah did play a game, and they put up points against Oregon.
I will say this though, Florida to go 10-2 with a backup quarterback. That's because remember Felipe Franks, who was their starter, got hurt week 3 against Kentucky, and Victor Trask, who had not he had not played a single game in high school, comes in and leads Florida to a pretty good season.
Yeah, and I remember midseason, I was ready to watch Franks one weekend because I put on a Florida game, and then Trask walks out in the field. I'm like, who's this guy? And he looked good. He really did. I believe that was the Auburn game, Florida versus Auburn, which was another great game in the season. But it's just my issue with this year's selection lies within the SEC being ranked so high. Another thing, same thing with Wisconsin. I'm so glad they kept Baylor at 7. If they would have moved Baylor down after going to overtime with Oklahoma, but put Oklahoma into the playoffs, I would have been quite upset about that. Obviously, it doesn't matter. Really, it really does not matter because they didn't get in the top 4. But still, the committee did a really good job this year.
One of the things I'm not really loving to talk about is you guys know how I'm an Alabama fan, and
they punished them hard.
I forgot
they
about
punished
that.
them pretty bad. Number 12, not in any New Year's Six Bowl. They actually they have the Citrus Bowl against Michigan, and don't worry, we have a common enemy in that game.
We do have a common enemy in that game, and Alabama's going to take that game easily.
Actually, you never know because Alabama right now, I think they have 7 people predicted to be drafted either in the first or second round. So you could see a lot of those guys sit out because, I mean, for them, they've always been used to playing in the playoffs.
Very true.
It's probably the first time that Nick Saban has to deal with his star players choosing to sit out.
Mm-hmm. It's a very different thing. I mean, look at how many players last year sat out their bowl games. I mean, LSU, when they played UCF, they were having wide receivers play cornerback.
Yeah. But, it's nice to see that the New Year's Six Bowls especially, most players are probably not going to sit out of those just because those games to those players are probably really important. And those juniors that are going to go to the NFL, like I don't really know if Shea Patterson's a NFL quality, but obviously
I always thought that Michigan was 1 star quarterback away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Shea Patterson, he's good.
He's a game manager. He won't lose you the game, but when you need a spark, you can't rely on him to give you that.
Definitely a field general. Yeah, I agree with that. And he's just not what everybody makes him out to be. Also, off topic, John Harbaugh sucks. I can't believe what I'm actually hearing right now. I cannot believe that I called Jim Harbaugh John Harbaugh. This was an honest mistake. However, I do detest the Harbaugh's mother for naming them so similarly. And this doesn't take anything away from the very simple fact that Jim Harbaugh still sucks. I'm an Ohio State fan. But you cannot go 0-5 against the Buckeyes. I don't care what your overall record is. And this is something that they said with John Cooper at Ohio State. 13 seasons, and he only beat Michigan twice. And it's not about what your overall record is. You can be 8-4 every season. That's good. That's a good record. But if you're not going to beat your all-time rival, your 100-plus annual game rival.
They can't even... They X out the letter M in every area of campus.
Exactly.
It's the game. It's the Super Bowl of college football for your program.
You don't even have to be a fan of either of these teams to know that this is not only one of the best rivalries in college football, but in sport. And it's been going on for so long. That's why it's earned its reputation being this great game. So for that reason, I think your record against that team, against Ohio State, you have to win.
I mean, when your brother is changing the NFL, I mean, you should be able to beat your rival at least once in 5 tries.
You got to feel bad for Jim for losing to his brother in the Super Bowl for Super Bowl 47. That's got to be a very salty Thanksgiving dinner that year.
And he didn't even coach bad in that game. Like, it was a 3-point game. Like, and they were literally on the 2-yard line going in to score to try to win the game, but Ray Lewis came up with a huge play to, I think he either picked it or he knocked it down.
Yeah, this is off topic and probably a pod for another time, but we're going to see a repeat of that 2013 Super Bowl this year. I'm convinced of it. It will be San Fran versus
How about that,
the Ravens.
That game today between the Niners and the Saints.
Unbelievable.
Game of the year.
Oh, absolutely.
That was
absolutely.
Rams Chiefs
48-46. I actually found out today that was the first game in NFL history to have that exact score.
Scorigami.
Yeah, Scorigami.
Yes, I'm obsessed with Scorigami.
Love
If you know anything about me, Scorigami is what I live for. When there's a Scorigami, there deserves to be a party. Anyways, back on topic. What were we even talking about? I don't know. Back on topic. Let's preview the matchups for the playoffs and also a couple of other notable bowl games. And I have a couple written down, but if you guys have any that you want to mention, we can talk about those too. But let's start with Clemson, Ohio State. As an Ohio State fan, I am worried. I am very, very worried.
Oh,
and
that was the one team that I was hoping they would not play because everybody is going to talk about 31-0.
Exactly. 31-0. And it's honestly not even that. It's seeing that it's seeing Jonathan Taylor tear up our defense this weekend.
And they have arguably one of the 3 best running backs.
I was just about to say Travis Etienne scares
the
the hell out of me. He really does. He's so versatile and elusive. We are going to struggle. We are going to struggle with him. It's not going to be a blowout that you've seen from Ohio State all this year. I don't know who's going to win. I'm leaning Clemson. I would love to see Ohio State try and out-coach Dabo Swinney. We'll see. But I am leaning towards Clemson in this one.
You know what? What I think here is I think they can take care of Etienne. I'm more worried about the quarterback play with Trevor Lawrence because with the Wisconsin game, especially the first game, keep in mind, Wisconsin's running back was in the Heisman hopeful discussion. I don't think he was actually going to win it, but he was in the Heisman hopeful discussion, and Ohio State took care of him just fine. I am nervous about these huge, big plays. Their cornerbacks, like Okudah, is going to have to show up. Their defense...
He's going to be matched up with T. Higgins, a very good wide receiver.
Yeah, very good.
So those matchup is going to be good. I love Ohio State's defensive front. I think Chase Young, I'm not sure if he's going to have the game that he has had in the early games of the season, but I think his attention is going to open up other spaces for other defensive ends and linebackers like Malik Harrison. They are very good, and I think they're going to clog the running game and force Trevor Lawrence to have a really good game.
I'm going to end the bad karma because his name is pronounced Travis Etienne. So it's E-T-N.
You know what? I've always said ETN, but I see the E afterwards, and I go, shit.
Yeah.
Is
it's always
it
just
nay?
it's always just saying the 3 letters of E-T-N.
Also, if you hear me get any names wrong on this podcast, I'm sorry. When I get to recording, everything just all those names they just go out the window.
Being a Bama fan, I've had to say his name a lot because he
wakes up in your nightmares.
44
yes, he does.
16. You'll never be able to get over that.
Yeah, I can't get over my good friend here being a Bama fan either, but that's another discussion. But yes, Clemson, they're very scary, and like Curtis was saying, Chase Young isn't going to have the game that he's been having, mostly because ever since he got put on the map after that Penn State game, everybody's doubling him, everybody's tripling him. And that's what we're going to see against Clemson too. And the issue is, if we find a way to stop Travis Etienne, yeah, that's great. But guess what? They have a quarterback that led them to the national champions last year. Yeah, that he's not having the season that he was having last year, but still, he has that experience, and that's so scary to go up against.
Very proven head coach.
Exactly.
Sweeney is arguably one of the best coaches in college football.
Yeah, say what you want about Clemson. They don't play the best conference schedule. They don't play that many great teams, but it's impressive that Dabo Sweeney leads them to a winning, not a winning season, undefeated season every year. Maybe they drop a stupid game like
4 straight ACC championships, like
2 straight undefeated seasons.
They've pretty much eliminated all competition in that entire conference.
They really have.
They're literally the entire ACC conference just because of how dominant they've become. They're making their 5th straight college football playoff appearance.
You know, another thing that's weird, I always look at that NC State game whenever they go up against NC State, and I'm like, oh, that one might be the upset because NC State breeds these great quarterbacks. You know, Russell Wilson wasn't there for long. Jacoby Brissett.
You got to be aware of the trap game, and we can probably talk about the trap game too with the LSU Oklahoma game too.
Yeah, exactly. And say what you want about Ryan Finley as well, but you know, he didn't play that well with the Bengals, but he played okay. Like, and he was really good in college. And so when you look at the ACC competition, yeah, there's not much, but these teams do have this individual talent that you can use.
They're still one of the proven teams. Haven't lost a regular season game in over 2 years. Only 15-0 team in college football history right now. 28 straight victories. If they win the national championship, they pass. Actually, no. If they win one of these next 2 games, they'll pass Florida State for longest in ACC history.
Really? Mm-hmm. When do you know when that was?
Yes, it was the year Jameis Winston won the national championship, and the year that they went 13-0.
What a game versus Auburn, that national championship.
Florida State has not been the same since, and it's kind of sad to see because they've had some great talent. I mean, Dalvin Cook is one of the best running backs in the NFL right now.
Yeah, and that's such a weird year to look back on because of everything that happened. There were so many teams that you could say, yeah, they're going to win the national championship. But you looked at Ohio State, 16th in their first CFB rankings, and they went and won it, you know? And I think that was a great way to start off the playoff era.
There was debate whether or not they should have even made the playoff.
Exactly. That's why it's such a great way for that
Everyone
playoff.
Was saying, TCU with Trevon Boykin. I remember him.
Yes, yeah, it was the debate between Ohio State, TCU, and
Baylor.
Baylor
had beaten TCU by 3, but Baylor had lost to West Virginia by 14, and TCU had beat them. So really, it was always between those 3 teams, and no one really thought about Ohio State until they won 59-0, because everyone said, "Well, JT Barrett's hurt. It's their 3rd-string quarterback. There's no way they're going to be able to be good," and they beat 3 straight Heisman winners. They beat Melvin Gordon, Amari Cooper, and Marcus Mariota back-to-back games.
It's off topic, but if we didn't have, or not we, because you're a Bama fan, but if Ohio State didn't have Cardale Jones in for that Wisconsin game, and JT Barrett never got hurt in the Michigan game, and we won by the same amount, do you think they would have thought the same thought process and put us in, or Ohio State? Sorry.
I honestly think that they would have looked back, because when JT Barrett got hurt that game, I think they were only up by 7 or something. They were not really looking good, and then Cardell came in, and then that's how we kind of got to know Zeke Elliott, because he was always having a good season, but he wasn't really where he was.
The guy.
He wasn't looked at as one of the best running backs in the country, and then
remember that 85 yards to the South play, Bama fan.
3 straight games of over 220 yards. Actually, in that Alabama game, he had a run of 85 yards and he had a run of 65. So he had 2 runs that accounted for over 130. And that Alabama's defense historically has always been about run defense.
Yeah,
team in the country.
I was just about to say, correct me if I'm wrong, but those 2 runs were the longest runs that Alabama had given up that entire season.
Yep.
And one of them was the dagger. It was the 42-28, 85 yards to the heart of the South.
The big reason that they won that game was, give credit to Luke Fickell when he was the defensive coordinator. You could say what you want about him being as a head coach, because 2011's a year that Ohio State fans want to forget.
Oh, boy.
But when he was just put as defensive coordinator, they said, all right, Amari Cooper is their best player. We're going to put 2 guys on him. and they held him to 71 yards. And people may say, well, that's kind of a decent amount for a receiver. Well, the guy had been averaging like 200 yards a game at receiver.
I'm also very impressed that you remember the exact yard total of him in that game. I feel like you go to sleep at night and you just stare at that score.
Just very good at stats. Like, remember how I just remembered that Joe Burrow had 393 and 3 touchdowns? Well, I mean, I guess it was because it was against Alabama. But
ESPN, the skies for higher. Also, fun fact, no playoff team who was the number 1 seed has ever won the college football playoffs. So LSU fans, I'd be sweating a little bit right now.
Actually, yep, that is true. And it's always come from the number 2 seed.
Mm-hmm.
Or
that's
the
true.
4.
Or the 4. It's
or
always
the 4.
been the 2 or the 4.
Yeah.
So if you're well, maybe it's not going to be the 4 this year because no offense to Oklahoma, but I don't really think they have the defense right now.
They're going to come out fired up.
Let's get into that game.
Well,
Yeah.
hopefully they hear this.
Let's get into that game.
Yeah, let's get into
We went on a long tangent there. I don't know how we ended up at 2014, but let's talk LSU Oklahoma. Like I said earlier, I think Oklahoma's going to come in fired up, but clearly Joe has different opinions on this. Let's hear it.
I will say this though, it'd be really cool to see Joe Burrow beat the former Alabama starter and the Alabama starter in the same year. And really, if Oklahoma wants to be in this game, they got to score a lot of points. Now, Jalen Hurts being at Alabama, he knows the LSU defense. I mean, he's struggled against them at times, but playing against the team, this is going to be his 4th straight year playing against them. So he's going to know a little bit more about LSU than most quarterbacks. That's the one thing that I think Jalen Hurts has an advantage of. And they have some very good guys like as you said, CeeDee Lamb's one of the best wide receivers in the country.
He really is.
Hazelwood was the number 1 recruit of any receiver for Oklahoma. Kennedy Brooks and Trey Sermon at running back. They've got some very good people on offense. The big thing is with Oklahoma is, can their defense be able to keep them in the game?
Yeah, but that's the thing with the Big 12 in general. That's why Baylor being such a defensive team this year, it was such a breath of fresh air to see in the Big 12. But that's really the point I wanted to make. This is 2 offensive teams. Say what you want about LSU. They their defense played well against Georgia. I have my own opinions on Georgia's offense, but their defense played well against Georgia. But they cannot have a game like they did against Ole Miss. They cannot give over 500 yards to Oklahoma.
250 yards rushing by the quarterback of Ole Miss and 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, and this is the reason why I really cannot wait for this game. It's going to be closer than people think, and it's going to be a really high-scoring game. I would take the over on 90 points. I really would.
I think I'm looking at somewhere like a 56-35. I think that Jalen Hurts is going to have a very good game, but they're not gonna score over 50 points.
It's not gonna be enough. Yes. It really won't.
One more key factor that I think about this game that I don't think a lot of people are looking at: the line of scrimmage. Who will win the line of scrimmage? Because if you watch LSU take on Georgia, Joe Burrow had all day to throw. If you had your quarterbacks typically have a 3-second body clock. This guy's body clock had to have been 5 seconds because he had such time to throw. And even when he was scrambling, when he got outside of that pocket, he could have time to get his head up and find the target. And same with Jalen Hurts. That's one of Jalen Hurts' weaknesses. If you can fluster him and you can crowd him and make him make these impulse decisions that elite quarterbacks have to make, that's how you can beat Oklahoma. And that's also how you can beat LSU if you get Burrow in that state.
Yeah.
Baylor kind of exploited that yesterday. They had a strip sack of him in his own red zone, and then they had a pick right on the series after. So if you can get after Jalen Hurts, you can force him to make mistakes.
Yeah, and if those 2 defensive plays didn't happen, that game would have been a lot larger of a deficit than it was. But you also got to think Oklahoma had a 10-point lead with 8 minutes left in that game, and they gave that up.
Yep.
And it was not impressive. Baylor honestly could have scored 2 touchdowns and put that game away. They really could have. But here's the thing. This is the reason why I think the Bengals need Joe Burrow, because they don't have an offensive line, and Joe Burrow works that pocket so well.
Even the guy they drafted this past year tore his ACL in the first week of a training camp, and he was out the whole year, so they didn't even have their first round pick this year. It was an offensive tackle.
Yeah, exactly, and they're not having the season that they want to, but it's gonna be a good thing. Can you imagine the accuracy of Joe Burrow and the arm of Joe Burrow throwing to A.J. Green, John Ross.
Assuming AJ, I don't know what to think about what AJ Green's going to do this offseason. I feel like he kind of wants to be out of the situation.
Yeah.
The thing about receivers is when they're getting close to 30, they don't really have as much years as a quarterback. So he's going to want to win now.
An ex-Georgia wide receiver as well. Now you can kind of see the decline in the Georgia offense because not only were they running back university, they were sort of wide receiver university with all of their wide receiving core that they have had over the years. But with Oklahoma, this can be a trap game. LSU can't take this lightly. They can't just look to the national championship game. They have to take this game seriously because Oklahoma is definitely capable. Now, unlike my two counterparts here, I am going to take the under on this one because I think the defenses are going to be a little bit more. It's going to be high scoring, but I don't think it's going to be 90. I'm probably going to say 41-32. LSU pulls it out.
Here's a thing for another day. If Oklahoma loses, do you think Lincoln Riley will coach in the NFL?
Lincoln Riley's gone.
Yeah,
I agree.
A lot of upside, very young coach, 3 college football playoff appearances. He's got a very good resume.
He was
NFL teams
really impressive at Nebraska. He is a really good coach, and he. I'm not even saying he doesn't get the credit he deserves. He absolutely gets the credit he deserves.
There's a need in the NFL. I feel like a lot of coaches are on the hot seat
under
right
Bob
now.
Stoops. Like, he was brought up to be a head coach, and he's done a fantastic job.
Absolutely.
I mean, if Cliff Kingsbury, who was 5-7 for most of his time in Texas Tech, can get an NFL job, I mean, certainly Lincoln Riley can.
Yeah, and Lincoln Riley, he looked like a really good hire when he was hired. But think about it from an Oklahoma fan standpoint. They looked at that team. They lost their legendary coach. They lost Bob Stoops. That is tough.
And all he's done, 2 Heisman Trophy winners back to back. One that could arguably has done better than both of them statistical wise. I mean, he is turning that place into a quarterback. And even with Spencer, I can't wait to see what Spencer Rattler is going to be.
Oh my gosh, I love that kid. As I watched his QB1, I don't like the guy as a guy, but still, wonderful quarterback.
If you haven't watched QB1, I suggest you do because there's a lot of quarterbacks to come from it that are going to be very good. Except if you're Tate Martell.
Yes, except if you're Tate Martell. Then your whole high school's a cakewalk. My God.
And then you can't even start at a 6-6 team that lost to Florida International this year. I mean, the U. Wow, that's a discussion for another day.
There was so much hype last year. The turnover chain, you just got this vibe. You kind of thought, kind of like Texas too. You kind of thought they were back, but
Joe
they're
Burrow's
not.
first one as an SEC quarterback was against the U.
Yeah.
I think we want to get into some of these other notable bowl games.
Let's give our predictions for Clemson, Ohio State, and also LSU, Oklahoma. It's a little too early to say anything. There might be people that are sitting out, people that are gonna get injured within the next few weeks. So this is varied to change, but let's start with Clemson, Ohio State. I'll give my score prediction. This will be somewhere in between an offensive and defensive battle. I'm going for a 31-28 Clemson
This is
win.
going to be a very close game.
Yeah.
It's the hardest game of the season, really, for either team.
It's the hardest game to pick apart, really.
Because these two teams we don't know what Clemson we're going to get. Are we going to get the Clemson that showed up against North Carolina, or we're going to get the one that's the defending national champions? And that's the thing that, as for Ohio State fans, I think they're most worried about, because Clemson is a team that can either be vulnerable or they can be deadly.
All right, so I am going to disagree with you guys, and I believe in the Buckeyes here. I think they can win it all, and my score prediction here, I'm going to go 37-29. Ohio State pulls it out.
I kind of see this either going two ways. I think it's either going to be Ohio State close, or we're going to get Clemson with a 10-plus point victory.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's either going to be a close win for Ohio State. I'd love for them to prove me
I'd
wrong.
love them to have like a big win against Clemson.
Oh, yeah. If we see a Wisconsin part 2, nobody expected us to win by that much.
It'd be one of the coolest things in the world if Ohio State won 31-0.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
It'd be the biggest karma, too.
Oh, yeah. And all those Clemson fans that were talking about that, they would
didn't
feel
even
so
care that they won the national championship that year. They only cared about how they shut out Ohio State.
Yeah,
that's really weird.
That's true. Yeah.
All right, so LSU, Oklahoma, I already said my prediction, 41-32. Burrow's squad takes it to the national title game. Max, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, like I said, high scoring. I don't think we're gonna get above 40s here.
Really?
I'd love to see it.
Oh, I'd love to.
But I just don't. I think Oklahoma. They've been hearing about their defense for years, and now they get this chance in the playoffs, and they're gonna try and prove themselves. We saw them against Georgia that one year in the playoffs. That game was great. Double overtime or something like that. I know Georgia went to overtime in both those games.
That was an amazing game.
Yeah, it really was. And Oklahoma's defense played well that game,
4 to 48.
even though it was super high scoring. And that's what I think we're going to see. I think we're going to see two defenses playing well, but it's still going to be a 49 to 45 win for the Tigers.
I'm going to go with 45 to 35. I think that LSU comes out and they score a lot. We get into the third quarter. I think Oklahoma's defense kind of plays a lot better, and
they pull a Baylor the first time that they played them. Come back.
Here's the thing. Here's my prediction. LSU scores 35 in the first half, and they score 10 in the second half. I think it's going to be, because you saw against Bama, it was 33-13 at half, and it ended up being 46-41.
They like to manage in the second half. They're not as aggressive in the second half.
If there's one thing that Joe Burrow is not, with all the great things he's done, the only thing that I could say he's not really done is the third quarter in some big games he's kind of struggled in. But that's the only thing that you can say that he hasn't done well. But think about this. LSU wins. National championship game is in New Orleans. That's a home game.
That's very true. It's in New Orleans, but here's the thing: Ohio State fans, they're known to travel. That would be one of the most. It's like a double home game. It's going to be a double home game if that's the game.
Last time these two teams played in the national championship was in New Orleans as well. So you're gonna have it's gonna be a lot of Tigers and Buckeyes fans if we get there.
Get your popcorn, everybody. No matter what matchup we get in the title game.
If we get the Tiger Bowl, the LSU Tigers against the Clemson Tigers, that'd be pretty cool as
well. I would enjoy it either one of those.
And don't cut out those Oklahoma Sooners as well. They can pull out the upset if LSU don't show up.
I can't say I'd love to see it because I'm just the biggest Joe Burrow fan.
Since we go to a school that's OU, and to see an OU team win a national win against Ohio State, that would be kind of weird.
Yeah, and if you want to play a fun drinking game, watch an LSU game and see how many, and take a drink every time that they mention Athens, Ohio. It's pretty fun.
Or one of my favorite things right now is listening to Ed Orgeron talk. I couldn't.
Absolutely beautiful.
The guy has
Go Tigers.
Literally can't even mimic it. It's so good.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers. All right. Well, it's been great talking to you guys. This has been a wonderful pod. I think we covered a lot of great topics here. We went off track a lot of times, but I think it was pretty knowledgeable when we did. I'll let you guys sign off. Any last comments you want to make?
It was very fun doing this for the first time. I'm definitely going to do this again. Thanks for having me on, Max. Curtis, it's nice working with you as well. Can't wait to see what happens this bowl season.
Yeah, I'm loving my time here. These colleagues of mine, we are good friends here, and I can't wait to come back here and just discuss all of the important news stories coming up, because as you can see, there is a lot to talk about that we're just so eager to really bite into, but we'll save that for another time, and I'm really hoping to stick around for that.
Yeah, it angers me when our group chat goes on these long paragraph of football discussions, because I'm like, no, wait, let's do a podcast.
Me, last week with the Browns losing to the Steelers, I went on a very long tirade about why I didn't think Freddie Kitchens was the right choice for head coach. We'll talk about that someday.
These are all topics we can do. Well, it was nice having you guys on. This will definitely be something that we do again. Any feedback or anything that the listeners have for us, feel free to reach out. Max Brunke tweets on Twitter. I'll let the boys give their Twitters out just in case we're famous. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, my Twitter handle is at Joe D Collins 1. That's JoeDCollins1, all lowercase.
All right, my Twitter is cfader_1. It's CFEDER_1. You can keep up for all content that I come out with, and I'm sure this podcast content will be on there as well. This is a great time to be a sports fan, folks. It really is.
And once again, mine is Max Brunke Tweets, MaxBrunke Tweets. All right, well, it's a great way to end it off. My name is Max Brunke. I was here with Joe and Curtis Fader, and this has been Sounds from Athens. Thanks for listening.